This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And we are a few days away from the start of the NBA season. Just a few. I know. It's like you went to sleep knowing that the NBA is over, but damn it, NBA is right back at it again. And it's the holidays, so it's the gift that really just likes to keep on giving, even when you don't really want the gift, right? So, but it's really an exciting time because that obviously puts us in overdrive, cranking out the content. And this week's show, we will not disappoint. We have a great guest on board. We're going to talk about NBA award previews. This is that time of the year, my man Shaw, man. He's like Kris Kringle up in this piece, man. I think he's coming in with his sleigh ride right about now. What's good, my brother? www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna, my PNC. What's up, Kris Kringle?
Yeah, you're trying to make me. I'm usually like a Krampus. That's usually how you describe me. So you got me in the holiday spirit. I appreciate it, man. But it's good because the league is coming back. This Christmas time stuff starting December 22nd. And, we have an amazing show with an amazing guest, one of the longtime friends of ours, not just in the podcasting and sports industry, just one of the quality dudes in the industry and just quality human beings out there, man. Can't wait to bring him on, bro.
Absolutely, man. Our man, Gerald Brown, if people do not know who he is, and you've been sleeping under a rock for most of your NBA life, but he is the host of Beeline Sports on SiriusXM Radio, and you can also get down with really profoundly two of our peoples, right? Because we've had one of them at least on our show, and we had a great interview, and then the other one, man, who can forget, man, his Detroit Pistons know about this dude. They about this dude, man. Ball don't lie. That's right, man. My man Gerald Brown does an excellent show called Let's Get Technical with Bonzi Wells and Rasheed Wallace. Our man GB, the OG, he's coming on board with us in a few moments so we could talk about these NBA award previews. So sit back, relax, and get ready for a wild discussion that we are going to have to get your mind right about who we think is going to be hoisting some awards come season's end. As always, get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. And as always, add us to your playlist. Allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things happening in the association. If you are online listeners, be sure to check us out on Dash Radio via the Nothing But Net Radio Network, the Baseline NBA show every Tuesday at 1 p.m. If you want to check out this episode and all of our previous episodes, and we've got a lot, but it's all good stuff, be sure to check us out at www.thebaselinenba.com. That is our home site. So be sure to go up in there. And as always, man, we appreciate each and every single one of you guys. Drop a comment, hit a subscribe, do whatever you got to do up and elevate the brand, the name, the show. We've been doing it for this long, but we do it for you, the listener. So again, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us. You know how we do. You know how we roll. Let's get this thing started. Let's talk NBA award previews with our man, GB, here on The Baseline.
Your crew has worked hard this year, so why not get them a gift to show your appreciation? Shop Lowe's for a DeWalt Power Detect 2-tool combo kit for $349. Mechanics Wear Durahide Impact gloves at only $29.98. Or how about a Metabo HPT The Tank compressor for $199? Shop Lowe's in store or at lowesforpros.com. And while you're at it, pick up a little something for yourself, too. Lowe's, the new home for pros. While supplies last. U.S. only.
Time to break it down. Time now for the breakdown. Callie Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast. And you know what time it is, man. It is time for us to do the illustrious NBA Seasonal Awards preview. But in order for us to drop these previews, man, we had to bring out the OG. He is a long-time guest, man. We always love bringing him on, always dropping the science. He has one of the best shows going on right now, the Bottom Line Sports Show on SiriusXM. But you could also check out his other show because this man is busy doing his thing. You can go and watch him and his boys, Bonzi Wells and Rasheed Wallace, on their show, Let's Get Technical, via YouTube. My man, Gerald Brown, is on board with us here to drop these previews. What's going on, my brother GB?
Likewise, brother, man. Always a pleasure to get with y'all, man. And you know what? I've been just saying this, even though we don't get a chance to communicate, I've been seeing y'all from afar and just continue what y'all doing. And I appreciate y'all.
Hey man, we appreciate you, man. We need a bar in order for us to reach, man, and you've never wavered from it. You continue to keep making it more and more difficult for us to get on your level, but that's okay. It's all right.
No.
But listen, before we
believe the hype.
exactly. So, but before we get right into the awards, I did want to get your take, really quick, Gerald, on what these last few weeks have been, which has obviously been, fast and furious, 4.0 as it pertains to the NBA getting itself ready for this upcoming regular season. The fact that it's obviously been truncated by 10 games. The idea that we're starting around Christmas holidays. And I just wanted to get your feel about everything that's going on, the good, bad, right move, bad move, that sort of thing.
Well, I think it's just been a very weird process. And I think clearly once the season reconvened in the bubble, we knew that they were going to have to do something to try to get it back on track and have some sense of normalcy. And thus, when they decided to start it December 22nd, there was a lot of opposition from the players talking about they would love to start it January, Martin Luther King Day weekend. But, the NBA and Christmas, that's a big, big day for the league as well as their advertisers and stuff and sponsors. So it's something that bears watching because, we've been able to see the blueprint with the NFL, Major League Baseball, that were, sports entities and organizations that played outside of their bubble. And we've had, guys getting COVID and stuff like that and games being canceled. So I think that we proceed with caution. It's great to get the season back and it's going. And hopefully, we'll be able to get through a whole season. But if anything, even with college basketball now, is prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah, I completely agree with where you're coming from on that. And, this is a new fold as it pertains to the NBA because now, they're trying to do this outside of the parameters of what the bubble had afforded them. And while first in my beginnings, I was leery about whether or not the NBA could pull this off, and they successfully did with regards to the bubble, this to me is clearly an even more challenging circumstance with the pandemic still, on the uptick, and the NBA feeling emboldened because I know that they feel like they've had the right formula, the most successful formula. I just hope that the momentum of what the NBA was able to achieve and accomplish doesn't get stymied because of what's going on right now. So hopefully, we'll be continuing to talk more basketball than we are talking about this pandemic through the course of this upcoming NBA season. But let's get right into it, man. Let's talk about these upcoming awards. And I think it's fitting that these awards are going to have a unique twist on it because a lot of movement kind of took place over the last week or so with the NBA draft and then transitioning right into NBA free agency. And so the first award that we're going to try and give our predictions on, Gerald, it's going to be the executive awards. And hey, man, minus the fact that there were a few executives who were on the chopping block this past season, a few of them obviously have decided to take some pretty bold steps to put their name on the map, and hopefully it will translate to their team being successful. So we just want to kind of get your take. Who do you foresee being the executive of the year for this upcoming NBA season?
Well, I have to go with the champs. And I mean, Rob Pelinka, and you look what the job that they have done. And I mean, clearly, sometimes the old saying that you can always give some of that award to LeBron James, but clearly what they've been able to do and on paper, it still bodes well to say that they are still the champions and likely to repeat, because not only did they reload, they got younger in areas that they, again, skilled in certain areas and younger with guys like Dennis Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell. I thought were very, very big moves for them. Granted, they bring in a Marc Gasol, and I think some of those pieces that they brought in were guys that'll play the roles that they need. And that was the beauty of all the moves that they made. It's almost like these ancillary parts that they brought in to sort of go with this centerpiece, which is LeBron James. And you brought in guys that have excelled in those roles. So if it's a Montrezl Harrell, he's in this role. He played it as a sixth man of the year. You're bringing in a Marc Gasol, Gasol, you're going to monitor his minutes. You're going to know exactly. For him, it's all about what he can give you in the postseason as opposed to the regular season. With Dennis Schroeder, you get younger and you have a little bit more offensive-minded basketball player than Rajon Rondo was there. So I like the moves that they made, and really I would have to say kudos to Rob Pelinka.
So, G, I'm with you. When it comes to Pelinka, but I'm going to go a different route only because I'm that a-hole. I'm that guy. It's like, all right, well, where did you start from? And then now where are you at? Now, again, this season has to play itself out, right? Like, we got to see where everything ultimately ends up landing. But the Lakers are the NBA champions. And sure, they got 2 leading candidates, or the guy who won 6th Man of the Year and the guy who finished second, right? They added that. That's a massive get. I kind of think the Gasol pickup is a little overrated. It's going to much be matchup based for him, so to speak. Wes Matthews and guys like that, perfect. But the Lakers are already the champs, so they didn't rest on their laurels, but they still got better. But I'm looking at a team like Portland and Atlanta, who to me have done the most to improve the depth of their roster. I think Portland now has a way that they can play small ball, they can play big ball. They made so many moves and acquisitions that made sense for them. And it's and Cal has a thing about Neil O'Shea, which, he can talk about at another time. But my pick is actually going to be the Atlanta Hawks and Travis Schlenk and what he did there. Getting Bogdanovich, getting Gallinari, you're going to get Capella back. So that's a move you made last year. So that doesn't count for this. But you get Chris Dunn, you get Rondo to be behind Trae Young. Listen, those young boys are going to have to figure out a ways to play, like the Hunters and the Herders and Cam Reddish. They're not guaranteed minutes because of Bogdanovich and Gallinari there. I think this Atlanta Hawks team is poised for a massive leap, similar to, I won't say similar. I think they have the ability to potentially be a top 5 seed. No, let me back up. 5 through 8 in the Eastern Conference. I don't think they're going to be a 4 seed, but I think they can get as high as to maybe a 5 seed and fighting for that, similar to like the OKC of last year as well too. I think the depth that they got, the amount of talent with veteran leadership as well too. I'm going to give it to Travis Schlenk because I just really feel like Atlanta is going to really be coming from the friggin' lottery and become now potentially a playoff team. And that to me is why that's great GMing if you ask me. Cal, what you got?
Well, I think you've laid out some really good selections, and I always wind up doing this. I always wind up hedging my bets. So if you're going to ask me on paper, ballot, go and pick up the award type thing, who's going to wind up winning Executive of the Year, I'm going to, jump on board with my man Gerald on this. I think it's going to wind up being Rob Pelinka. But if you're going to ask me who I think might wind up being very, very competitive, and I'm surprised you didn't mention this, but James Jones and the Phoenix Suns. Look, I'm not saying that one trade makes all the difference of the world of whether or not you become an Executive of the Year, but you look at what he has incrementally done, and sometimes being considered as an Executive of the Year is an accumulation of the improvement that teams will make. And I think if the Phoenix Suns put themselves, which there now clearly can be a chance of them doing that, given where the Golden State Warriors are impacted as far as their roster goes, if the Phoenix Suns can make a push and enter in the fray as being a team that's in the top 5, right? Man, having a guy like Chris Paul, filling out the roster, adding Jay Crowder, to me, it's just those little things. And that significant win total from last year to this year might push him in that conversation. So while I think in a realistic sense, he may not win it, I do think that he may get some serious nods if the Phoenix Suns show the level of improvement. And I think a lot of people are expecting them to show because of the acquisition of Chris Paul, but more so because James Jones was adding essential pieces around to make this a more veteran-laden team to accompany Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton.
Guys, I just want to add something. I think those are both great picks, and I think that clearly, we're talking about 2 franchises in the Phoenix Suns as well as in the Atlanta Hawks, teams that really, again, have playoff depth and have playoff success, let alone playoff history. They went out and they overspent in some regards. Like the Atlanta Hawks, they gave a lot of money to Danilo Gallinari, and I think that when you are a franchise that is trying to take that next steps, you got to sometimes overpay. You got to pay to certain guys and whatever, and then you just hope everything works out. I think the guy that you're right, Shaw, in terms of Rob Pelinka and what he was able to do, clearly they were the champs. But think about it. For the most part, they got bargain value for a lot of those guys. And if LeBron James hadn't signed that extension, requested that extension and got it, they were set up to go into next year with enough money to even make a run at Giannis if he's still available, but add another max player. So I think the handling of the cap is what really stands out to me and stuff like that, because again, they spent enough, but they didn't really spend a lot. They brought in a lot of guys and stuff like that, especially Gasol with his 1-and-1 deal. But still in all, be able to still we're still set up to be a player in next year's free agency, which is supposed to be the free agency class. So
yeah, and I don't disagree, Gerald. I mean, if we're gonna keep it a buck, I think Pelinka's gonna win. I think there's Lakers exceptionalism everywhere we look. So in that too, but part of being a good GM too is being able to retain your guys. So you got LeBron to commit, you got AD to commit as well too, and that should factor into it's not just about who do we get in free agency. It's like, hey, who did you keep? Did you keep the core of your team intact? And they've kept that core intact for years. So I 100% think Pelinka is going to win the award. He just wouldn't get my vote if I had one, and maybe that's why I'll never have one.
Atlanta's good. I like Atlanta and Phoenix, and granted, you do have to spend money, but I like Atlanta. I thought Atlanta could have been a playoff team, especially in the East last year, if John Collins didn't have that, suspension and stuff like that, because I think that he had clearly had something going with, Trae Young. So and in Phoenix, look, you bring in a Chris Paul. It's a big gamble, but still in all what he was able to accomplish in OKC, clearly Monty Williams being able to manage his time and minutes, keep him healthy. I think sky's the limit for both franchises.
And the last thing I'll say real quick, real quick, is just that with the Hawks situation, they needed to protect them from becoming the Milwaukee Bucks. They haven't had the same success, but Trae Young is their Giannis, so to speak. He's their franchise guy. And Trae Young, as a second-year dude, was going into the office and complaining like, hey, I'm already tired of losing. Bro, you've been here a year and a half. What are you talking about? But it is what it is. So they were like, bump it. All right, we're not going to have this Giannis situation where, hey, we're giving you all the tools you can potentially have. And I think our good friend Tony Jones, out there for the Athletic, he said, yo, Lloyd Pierce is on the clock, bro. Like he's got to get it done with this roster one way or the other. All right, that's enough on the executive of the year. Good stuff.
Nice, Shaw. So let's go and transition. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. So awkward. Anyway, we got our man, Gerald Brown. And I guess that's what makes this such a unique episode for us, man. We just free flowing with this, man. So this ain't going to be the same structure type of style that we normally like to do. We just letting it fly, man. Because, again, we running with the OGs, man. It's like the boot camp click up is in this piece. So let's just keep that 100. All right. Our man Gerald Brown joining us here as we do our award preview selections. And so let's go ahead and transition to the next award, and that's going to be Manager of the Year. And listen, there's some really, really interesting selections. The one thing that I'm going to say, and Sean, I'm going to have you jump in on this real quick. The one thing I will say about this is that I think that there's going to be a unique take in how you're going to go about selecting who the Manager of the Year is because of the unique circumstances of how some of these rosters have been filled out. I think it's wide open this year. And typically teams that wind up having great records probably wouldn't be in play over the last couple of years because I think that's just been somewhat played out. You saw last year with Nick Nurse claiming that, he obviously have proved that you don't have to have the most wins for you to exemplify that you are probably the most effective coach with the roster that you have. So I think uniquely this year is set up for us to say all of these teams are in play, and it just really comes down to the resume. What are your thoughts on that, Shaw?
Yeah, 100% agree. This is one of those awards that it's always just kind of what do you want to make of it? Is it the best team with the best coach? Is it the coach who did the most with the least? Is it the coach who just maybe surprised you in some ways or the other? The criteria is very, very vast. It's interesting, though, that with talking about Lakers exceptionalism, because of the LeBron factor, Frank Vogel is not even on anyone's radar when it comes to this. And I didn't even know where he finished last year in that aspect. But it's just a kind of a strange situation. And for me, when I'm looking at this, I'm usually kind of like the underdog. Like, all all right, well, who did the most with the least, or kind of came out of nowhere? But with that said, I think I have 4 guys, and I'll just, I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, so to speak. But Lloyd Pierce, I think, is going to be a candidate. I think Monty Williams is going to be a candidate. I think Doc Rivers, if the Sixers perform to the levels that the Sixers are supposed to perform, is going to be a candidate. And Steve Nash is going to be a candidate if Brooklyn ends up as a top 2 seed. With that said, I've been kind of kicking it around all day, and I'm going to, preface this a little bit too, with kind of understanding of what I've seen in training camp already from the media and like how coaches are planning to use certain guys and things of that nature. And I'm kind of going to harken back a little bit to even what you said, Kyle, and to what we were talking about a little bit with Phoenix. I think Monty Williams is probably best positioned to capture this award right now as well, too. I was on the fence because I think Nash, I could say some other things too that's probably not as politically correct, but I think he's going to get some heavy consideration, especially having those 2 superstars there. But I think Monty Williams, with the rapport he already has with CP3, and if they get that Phoenix team into the playoffs and especially have the ability to scare the hell out of some guys, and Devin Booker, quote unquote, has an MVP-like season in terms of consideration, I think that's the guy right there.
I agree with Shaw. I mean, Lloyd Pierce, you want to kind of root for a guy like Lloyd because obviously you would think that he's kind of in that Kenny Atkinson mode where he's just a guy that's kind of the placeholder, if you will, until the team gets better, and then they'll move on to try to get a name brand coach. But I like Monty Williams. What this team was able to do in the bubble and the way they finished strong. And I think his connection with that young team and its experience, it bodes well for them. I think my dark horse, if you will, my dark horse will be Terry Stotts. I like Portland. And I mean, granted, my vote is for Monty Williams, but if my dark horse would be Terry Stotts simply because, Portland got off to a weird start last year, and they really, really struggled. And then they caught fire at the end in the bubble, and were able to do some things. And now, like Shaw mentioned, in terms of adding depth to that team, they were decimated by Zach Collins and Nurkic being out at some point. But Terry Stotts is set up that if this team, if everything plays out well, how surprising would it be if they were the number 2 seed behind the Lakers and stuff like that? So I'm going definitely Monty Williams, but dark horse candidate would be Terry Stotts.
Man, it's really tough. And this is partly why I had said, on paper, this is who I think might wind up getting it. But then in my heart, this is who I think should get it. So I'm going to go on the fence and say, look, on paper, I feel like if the Lakers resoundingly dominate this season, which they are capable of doing, I think Frank Vogel is going to get the nod. Because on paper, I think that's what's going to be reflective. I think a lot of people want to see if whether or not Steve Nash is capable of doing it. I don't know if I'm completely sold on this Brooklyn Nets team to be as good as everyone wants them to be. And I would probably choose Doc Rivers before I would choose Steve Nash. But again, in a realistic world, if Steve Nash somehow gets the Brooklyn Nets to be one of the top 2 seeds, how can it be ignored that you wouldn't give an award like that to him the same way that you gave the award to Steve Kerr when he took that Golden State Warriors team to the championship after he took over what Mark Jackson basically had built for that organization, right? So that's the realistic part of me speaking about this. My heart tells me, though, that there's 2 people that I really think should be in high consideration for this. It's either going to be Monty Williams, definitely for sure, because again, I'm expecting the most upside with this Phoenix Suns team to continue to do what they did in after the NBA restart. But I'm also looking at Rick Carlisle. Look, this Dallas Mavericks team, only 43 wins. If, and I understand that Porzingis is going to be gone for at least a short portion of the first part of the season. But if this team performs well and you've got a perennial MVP candidate like Doncic on board, which obviously I'm giving you foreshadowing about where I'm going to be with that selection later on and we get in that conversation. How would it be far-fetched if the Dallas Mavericks wind up being a top 3-4 seeded team in the Western Conference, incremental win growth under Rick Carlisle, that he wouldn't be under consideration for winning something like that? I again, on paper, I think it's going to be Vogel because I think the Lakers are poised again to dominate, probably wind up being better than whoever's coming out of the East. And I think in that sense, he winds up getting in any other situation, he would not be getting this award. But I think you may have to consider it given the fact that he has to get these guys to play well. He's proven that this team is great defensively under him. I think he might wind up being rewarded for that when he was overshadowed this past season for what he did accomplish. But in realistic terms, I would love to see Monty Williams get it or Rick Carlisle get it.
That's a fair assessment. And again, I mean, it's counter to what I said, with the Lakers, because I think, if you have LeBron, the coach never really gets the credit there. I have to look back in the history, and I don't know. I'm too lazy to look it up right now, but I'm just trying to see if a LeBron-led team has his coach ever been the coach of the year. I feel like it would have to be maybe Spo, one of those. I don't know. We have to look that up, but I think it's a good pick and solid pick simply because the Lakers are projected to be one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NBA, let alone the Western Conference this year.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA with our special guest, Gerald Brown of Let's Get Technical with Bonzi Wells and Rasheed Wallace. Be sure to catch him on YouTube. We still got more predictions coming your way as we give you our NBA seasonal award predictions for the 2021 NBA season, which includes Rookie of the Year and MVP. So keep us locked because we got plenty more to drop here on The Baseline.
Lowe's has all the top gifts for home this holiday, like Craftsman tool storage made in the USA and available in a selection of sizes, starting at $198. And right now, get a special price on a Lenovo Smart Clock with Google Assistant for just $24.99. Shop gifts in-store or from home on our app and Lowe's.com with free shipping on thousands of items or pick up curbside for contactless service. Valid November 22nd through December 31st. U.S. only.
This holiday at T-Mobile, it's not about how far apart we are. It's about how close we can be. So we're bringing out our best deal. Right now, get the iPhone 12 on us on every single plan with eligible iPhone trade-in.
Cool. So I can FaceTime with my sister in Savannah.
That's right. The iPhone 12 on us on every plan on America's largest 5G network. It's time to holiday on with T-Mobile.
With 30 monthly bill credits plus tax. If you cancel credit, stop and balance on required finance agreement may be due. Contact us for well-qualified buyers. Qualifying consumer plan required. See coverage and offer details at T-Mobile.com.
We're back. Callie Warrenshaw, the Baseline NBA podcast, and with us our special guest, Gerald Brown. He is the host of the premier show, the Bottom Line Sports Show, that you can catch on SiriusXM NBA Radio. You can also catch him with his boys, Bonzi Wells and Rasheed Wallace, as they host a dynamic show, Let's Get Technical. I love that title. You can catch those guys on YouTube. All right, so as we keep things moving along, GB, let's talk about the next award for us to give our predictions on, the Most Improved Player of the Year. I feel like this is a throwaway award, but you may be able to enlighten me a little bit better than my co-host does. What do you say about who you think should win this award?
Well, I thought about somebody earlier, and then just hearing what you're saying and knowing that, again, like last year, like, could we honestly say that based upon the way he played in the playoffs, and I'm just questioning, would it be a far stretch to say that a guy like, oh my God, his name escaped me, from the Denver Nuggets. I'm escaping.
Porter?
Huh?
Jamal Murray or Porter? Jamal Murray?
Murray, yeah. Like, would it be a far stretch to reach and say Jamal Murray, based on what he did in that playoffs? He took his game to a next level. I mean, could you consider him? And I mean, granted, yeah, this was a team that went in the playoffs, but I mean, his role went went out the roof in terms of what he was able to do in the playoffs. But honestly, earlier on, I've been thinking about this. I think a guy like Markelle Fultz, now he's in a groove and he gets into Orlando, and provided some of those guys can stay healthy in terms of Jonathan Isaac and Mo Bamba, those young guys with that group, and having Vucevic and Fournier, I think that maybe, just maybe, I mean, look, this guy was the number one pick. He was the number one pick by the 76ers. He encountered so much in terms of the expectations of being the number one pick that he failed to live up to those expectations. But I kind of believe that, he has another year under his belt. I think that maybe he'll be in a situation where, surprisingly, with that team, that he could be the most improved player. But I just thought about that in terms of Jamal Murray. Would you take his performance, and if he's able to translate that over to a full season, would he be somebody that we consider as most improved player?
I like where you're going with that, Gerald, and I will add this in the show. I want to get your take on this as well. But I honestly believe that the only reason why they would do that, they would consider Jamal Murray is if there's a level of guilt knowing that he's not going to get considerations for MVP if the Denver Nuggets overachieve this upcoming season. I think if they are as they are, then it'll be because of the combination of Murray and Jokic, which, last year we were trying to give the MVP considerations to Nikola Jokic, right? Now that we've seen what Jamal Murray is actually capable of, and we won't know what kind of Jamal Murray comes in this shortened offseason and how the Denver Nuggets are going to perform at the beginning of the season. I think how they perform in the beginning is going to give us a really good indication onto whether or not we should take what Jamal Murray gave us seriously. But if we're going to do that, given that Kevin Durant's now back in the mix, and obviously Jason Tatum has gotten consideration, and then everyone's going to put LeBron James and Anthony Davis. People are going to continue to overlook, and there's obviously Dame Lillard's always in the mix and always disrespected. People are going to always overlook Jamal Murray. I don't know if they're going to seriously consider him for MVP. I know we may look at his numbers and say that we should consider him, but ironically enough, that's always the fail-safe. If you can't give the guy the MVP award, we can give him, most improved of some sort. I feel like that's going to be the fallback if he doesn't get serious considerations for MVP, if that type of Jamal Murray that you're talking about, Gerald, winds up performing in this upcoming NBA season. The floor is yours, Shaw.
I might be, a day late and a dollar short. Jamal Murray was my pick last year, right? And, he didn't get there except for most improved. And he just didn't show that. And I think we're all concerned about the level of consistency. Is this 35, 40-point assassin the guy we're going to see through 72 games? Or does that guy only show up for playoff time? And if you're Denver, is that okay? Because if that guy shows up just for the playoffs, that's still okay. But you know what I mean? It's just like that level, that workload can be a little bit difficult, I think, when you're trying to do that or just kind of flipping the switch and turning it on. I love to pick a Fultz. I think there's a lot of guys here that you can look at this. I looked at Marvin Bagley. He just had such an awful year last year. So I think if he stays healthy, there's opportunity for him to garner some attention there. A guy like Kevin Knox, who was forgotten in New York last year. So does he just get out here just by virtual playing time? Does he get the opportunity now to become most improved? And a lot of the most improved sometimes is just about opportunity. But the guys that I think my top three, I look at OG Anunoby in Toronto. I'm too afraid to make him as my final selection, but I see the signs there of his growth and what he could potentially be, especially with Ibaka and Gasol and some of those guys gone now. More of a workload can be placed on Anunoby, so I think he'll get some consideration. Michael Porter Jr. kind of has to be thrust into a deeper role in Denver alongside, there are 4 months in Jamal Murray. But I'm going with a different Murray after all that foolishness I just said. I'm going with DeJounte Murray in San Antonio. I think the Spurs are poised to try to turn the keys over to him a little bit. Yes, DeMar and LaMarcus are still there, but they are phasing them out slowly but surely. Pop came out this week and said the Spurs are going to be in a more fast, up-tempo style, that kind of like what we saw in the bubble without LaMarcus. Aldridge is almost going to be relegated to a corner 3-point specialist at this point now as well too, and it's going to be Murray's team to run along with Lonnie Walker and guys like that as well too. So I think DeJounte, not having the injury stuff that he dealt with last year, is poised to be the most improved player in the NBA this year. What do you think, Cal?
Listen, I like that. I liked DeJounte Murray's selection. That's a sleeper selection because I don't think a lot of people are going to be talking about the San Antonio Spurs, right? And I think a lot of it too is DeJounte Murray's impact is going to have to help the San Antonio Spurs be relevant or even in the conversation, one, for the Southwest Division title, which is clearly open right now, right? Like, I can't wait for us to do our previews. I think a lot of people think that the Dallas Mavericks might hands down just run away with it, but I also think it's still going to be competitive, which is part of the reason why I am going to go with my selection of someone that I know it's kind of like, really? I'm going to go with Dillon Brooks with the Memphis Grizzlies as the selection. I really believe that the combination of Ja Morant and Dillon Brooks is going to be a future backcourt combination for people to watch out for. And I think the success, I know a lot of people think this is based on Jaren Jackson and Ja Morant, but I really think that Dillon Brooks has the opportunity to be one of the premier two-way players in the game. He can shoot the basketball definitely better, and I think he's going to get more opportunities to do that. The Memphis Grizzlies proved that they want to hang with the big boys, and they basically are going to be working from the bottom up. So I really like his upside because he is going to be so much is going to be placed on his shoulders to help this Memphis Grizzlies team compete. I don't think a lot of people recognized what he had to do to help this basketball team in so many different ways, because a lot of it was about Ja Morant being the man. But I think, like the same way we talk about Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, Dillon Brooks is going to have to be Ja Morant's Klay Thompson. And I think there's going to be more than enough opportunity if we're talking about competing in this Western Conference. If he steps up in a big way to elevate that Memphis Grizzlies team, because they still have the Pelicans after him, for some weird reason, I think the Kings are going to try and run after him. Obviously, the Suns are in play. The Spurs are in play. Dillon Brooks, watch for him and see how his numbers wind up faring. There's nobody that's going to be able to replace what he's going to bring to the table. And I think by that standard alone might put him right there in the mix. But I love your pick, Shaw, about Michael Porter Jr., because I believe that if the Denver Nuggets are going to exceed those expectations, Michael Porter Jr. has got to be unleashed, and it'll be interesting to see if Mike Malone does it. There was one other sleeper pick that I had that unfortunately got stymied because of the Philadelphia 76ers, again, overdoing it. But I was looking to see if whether or not Matisse Thybulle was going to wind up getting significant minutes playing under Doc Rivers. But then the recent move that they had now puts him back in play where I feel like is going to be a role player. And I don't know if whether or not he's going to wind up getting those starter minutes that I was hoping that he would get, because if I think that he gets those starter minutes, watch out for his numbers to improve greatly, because I think he's a key piece for the Philadelphia 76ers to make any serious run against any of the better teams in the Eastern Conference.
Well, you know my philosophy on second-year guys getting that award. Like, I just can't do it. So, they're just supposed to be better. Ironically, I threw in a third-year guy in Bagley and Knox, who just basically got forgotten about last year. And Bagley obviously had all the injuries. But, I think the selection of Brooks is really unique, especially from the Memphis standpoint, because I pay attention to that fan base. We're good friends with Sharon Shai Brown, who covers that team relentlessly. And they always talk about Brooks as kind of one of those, you hate him or love him. He's kind of like, no, yes, guys. And if he can find some level of consistency to get into this conversation, that would be awesome for the Memphis Grizzlies.
It ain't like they didn't do this once before when they had OJ Mayo, bro. Okay, so we know what the Memphis fan base be like with that when it comes to that. But at least Dillon Brooks plays defense, okay? At least he tries to play defense, okay? You're tuned to the baseline. Kelly Warren Shaw discussing that. Well, listen, I always got to throw a name out there which you guys have got to hammer. So Gerald, don't be trying to act like you being nice. I deal with this on a weekly basis. Shaw shuts down all of my selections like real quick. So if you feel the need,
it was unique. I said it was unique.
I like Dillon Brooks, and I think that if Jaren Jackson doesn't have that injury. And I mean, there was some talk that I think Dillon Brooks said that, Jaren Jackson has grown 2 to 3 inches. You can have a nice nucleus that's in place for the Memphis Grizzlies. And I think that they have something special in terms of with Morant and Brooks. But I think Dillon Brooks is the wild card in that whole situation, because clearly you drafted Jaren Jackson Jr., you got him high. Ja Morant was the rookie of the year. And Dillon Brooks is this kind of guy that's kind of meshing in with them. And, he was a guy that, honestly, he took away minutes that was supposedly going to go to a top pick in Josh Jackson, who was traded there and really couldn't get on the court. So I like Dillon Brooks, and I like what the future can be for the Memphis Grizzlies moving forward, provided they all stay healthy.
I like the sound of that, my friend. I like the sound. Gerald Brown joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to check out the show, Let's Get Technical, with my man Gerald, Bonzi Wells, and Rasheed Wallace. All right, so now let's go ahead and let's talk about the Sixth Man of the Year. Can we finally stop giving the award to Lou Williams? Can we stop always talking about Eric Gordon? Yeah, I know they gave it to Harrell, but I'm just saying honestly, Shaw, if Montrezl Harrell was playing for some other team, okay, they probably still would have wound up giving it to Lou Williams. I think Montrezl Harrell probably figured out a way to like muffle Lou Williams in like the final games or whatever, just so he can put himself in a position. They don't talk about these things in the NBA streets, but we'd be foolhardy not to acknowledge that Lou Williams probably would have been like, "Oh, you gonna give it to me again?" Who am I to say no to something like that? Because he was in the
Lemon Pepper
consideration.
Lou is done. They have ostracized Lou Williams ever since his strip club incident.
Well,
He
Magic
will be
City.
getting no more awards.
He's letting the awards get into his head, right? All right. Well, since you stepped up to the mic first, Shaw, talk to me about what you think or who you think winds up being sixth man of the year.
This is another one with a zillion and one candidates, so to speak. Especially, we don't really know what's happening, I think, in the Charlotte realm just yet, because I think looking at Devontae Graham or Terry Rozier, don't know who's starting there. So either one of those guys, I guess, if they go to the bench, can potentially be that guy. Will Barton coming back off of his injury, potentially going to become playing a six-man role for Denver. I think I like Eric Pascal potentially in Golden State as well too. I'm hoping that DeMarcus Cousins can regain some form. I'm hoping out hope. I don't think it's going to happen. Aaron Holiday, Serge Ibaka. I think all those are names that could potentially, garner some support here. Danilo Gallinari is supposed to be coming off the bench in Atlanta, and he's probably like my number 2 guy, just because he's going to come off the bench and score, and give them some rebounding and things of that nature. But the guy I am picking is Tyler Hero. I think he is going to explode on the scene this year. Obviously, I live in the South Florida area. While I'm not a Heat fan, I just get inundated with Miami news, and they love this dude. And they're not going to make a whole lot of changes to their starting lineup. I think he has the opportunity now to really kind of be that spark plug. He is fearless, as we all know. He can drop 37 on you without even thinking about it. And I think for the Miami Heat, they love to see him be able to come in and be this guy who do a little play creation and do a little bit of everything. But most importantly, he's just fearless on the court. Tyler Hero for sixth man of the year.
I question that whole thing with the bubble, because I think that some of those teams, like mainly with Miami, I just still have questions where you had guys that played so well, and one of the things is that how do you differentiate the fact is that these guys were playing such great basketball, Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, and yet they were so inexperienced, and it was like, wow, it really stood out. However, you think about it, they weren't playing in any home, visiting fans arena. They didn't have to worry about travel. So a lot of those things went out the window, and it was really, from some of the people I talked to, it was just like a pickup game. It was, you didn't have the fans and all this other stuff. There was a lot of things that were, that we have that are in place that, again, would alter things like winning on the road, playing on the road against, opposing team's fan base. So, I mean, Tyler Hero, he played well. Be very interesting to see if they could be able to duplicate what they did last year in the bubble. But, it was 2 guys and stuff. Josh Okogie from Minnesota. I think, again, a lot of the attention is going to be really focused on Anthony Edwards to go along with, what's his face, Karl Anthony Towns. But I like Devontae Graham. Devontae Graham was very, very impressive for the Charlotte Hornets last year. And, granted, Terry Rozier is the guy that got a lot of the attention because of the contract he signed. But I like Devontae Graham and what he was able to do. And granted, it all depends on what the Hornets do during the course of the season, that I think the more they win, the more attention that a guy like Graham will get. But I'm going to go ahead and say that those 2 guys, mainly it's going to be Devontae Graham as my sort of sixth man of the year pick.
Yeah, it's interesting how we can now broaden, the scope of what the sixth man of the year should or might wind up representing. And I think, based on how teams perform either defensively or offensively, I think is going to go a long way in individualizing those guys who might wind up picking up this particular award and how they're being used. Clearly. Look, Doc Rivers being back over in Philadelphia. Hey, he has obviously had his hand on the spectrum of who the sixth man of the year award should wind up being, because he's had access to Lou Williams and he's had access to Montrezl Harrell. So would it be a far fetch to see him take a guy like, Matisse Thybulle to possibly become maybe in a year or 2, right? I would love to see this guy as a starter, but he certainly has proven how valuable he really could be coming off the bench for a team like the Philadelphia 76ers, who desperately need someone else to help defensively. And if he could step up himself offensively, it'd be great, but too young, too soon. There's two people that I'm really looking at that might be, because now that the door is open, because they gave it to Montrezl Harrell, who we might want to be considering. Marcus Smart for the Boston Celtics, which I think is a long overdue situation. I mean, for the last couple of years, this guy is the Swiss Army knife as it pertains to the Celtics' ability to stay as successful as they have been. If they maintain what they're doing again, listen, if he continues to improve shooting the three ball, he obviously maintains his defensive player of the year efforts that he always does in year out. This is an opportunity. This is a year for him where he could wind up probably snatching that title. But I think the person who probably winds up getting it is Spencer Dinwiddie with the Brooklyn Nets. And the only reason why I'm saying that is I know everybody is on the hype train about Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, but I think the person who is going to benefit more than anything of having a guard as a head coach for Steve Nash is going to wind up being Spencer Dinwiddie. The guy averaged 20 points last year, and part of that is obviously because Kyrie Irving was injured. But who's to say that Kyrie Irving is the Kyrie Irving that everyone keeps thinking is going to get out on that basketball court? And who's to say that Kyrie Irving's chemistry with the rest of that basketball team is cemented in them being great? I still think it comes down to what Dinwiddie does. And I don't think that he loses a step, albeit I think he's going to be overshadowed because of the fact that Durant and Irving are going to be back on that court. But when I think it's all said and done, and we're talking about the success of this Brooklyn Nets basketball team, it's going to be about when Dinwiddie checks in those games and how he shoots that basketball. And maybe even to some degree, if Steve Nash relies on Dinwiddie to be taking major minutes in that fourth quarter because Kyrie Irving is either not 100% or just ain't got it together, to have a guy like that on the court, to me, signifies that if he winds up being the person I think he's obviously been over the last few years, he winds up being the sixth man of the year.
I think that's a tall order only because there's just so much ball there, and he's being dangled as a trade bait so much and so forth. You still have LeVert there. You still have Joe Harris there who's going to want to get his shots, even the bigs and Jared Allen and DeAndre Jordan as well too. I think the only reason they don't potentially move him is because of the Kyrie factor. Kyrie comes out this week and says now he's not talking to the media. He's blacking us out for the entire year to focus on the championship, et cetera, et cetera. All right, Kyrie, do your thing. No worries. But if that's what it is, Dinwiddie is a nice piece to have just in case. But I can't see the stats being there because of all the guys, especially if they keep that team intact. It's going to be so tough. I love the Marcus Smart angle only because it's always whoever scores the most is always the person who scores a bunch of points, and that's who you look at for coming off the bench and getting the sixth man of the year. So I'd love to see a guy like Smart get some consideration, but I'm harder on the Dinwiddie angle only because they just have so many guys there that need the basketball, and he's going to have a hard time getting it.
Yeah. Let me throw a wild card in there, guys. I think somebody perhaps maybe like from that Milwaukee Bucks team that's anticipated on being one of those top teams in the East, and maybe if it's a guy like Pat Connaughton that, again, and now in that role and having all the other pieces that are there, being able to thrive in sort of that six-man role and stuff. I maybe it's a guy like Pat Connaughton or somebody on that sort of that Milwaukee Bucks team right there, because of the fact is the way they play, number one, and then also, as you mentioned, in regards to Sean, they're going to win and they're going to do a lot of scoring. But, I mean, you having guys like Brent Forbes who played very well down in San Antonio. DJ Augustine, I think, is a veteran and stuff. He knows his role and what is expected. But I just like some of these other guys and stuff like that from a Bobby Portis who, it has went sort of in the abyss in terms of going from Chicago, then playing with New York, getting another opportunity. Now he's playing with the Milwaukee Bucks. So it could be somebody out of that crew. I wouldn't be surprised if they came from the Milwaukee Bucks. And if that's the case, you could say that Milwaukee Bucks are really sitting really pretty in that top seed in the East.
Well, let's spend some time here a little bit. I mean, we jumping out the window with names. We spend a lot of time talking about Matisse Thybulle. We've talked about Dylan Brooks. We got Pat Connaughton rolling out here as well too. I'm rolling off the reservation with the DeMarcus Cousins. Like, all right, so let's get wild with it. You know what I mean?
You never know. You never know.
I'm going to throw out two more names, and these are super deep sleepers and long shots out there. But look at Cole Anthony for six man in Orlando. If especially Fultz isn't really up to the task, so to speak, so that would go against obviously what you're picking, Gerald, a little bit. But if Cole Anthony can be that sniper guy coming off the bench, scoring a lot of points, and then another rookie, Tyrese Halliburton in Sacramento, especially if something happens with Buddy Hield and he decides that he wants to force his way out of there, or starts pouting or whatever the case may be, they may play Halliburton a lot at that 2 guard and giving him some shot, and he may get a lot of run out there where he could potentially, as a rookie, get 6th man of the year. Again, super deep, like comatose, Rip Van Winkle sleep, but just trying to throw some names out there.
I mean, I think clearly one thing it is just follow, and we'll move on. Marvin Bagley. Talk about how good it would feel if he was able to win some type of award, 6th man or comeback player of the year, most improved, whatever it is. How good would it feel for not only him, as well as the Sacramento Kings fan base and management, because they essentially, and clearly this was probably the owner's pick, they took Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic. And I've heard some people within the NBA say that cost the Sacramento Kings about $1 billion just on the fact is the marketability of a Doncic, who is potentially, obviously, an early candidate to be an MVP. But if Marvin Bagley could play well to garner any one of those awards, I think the Sacramento Kings would take a sigh of relief and feel good about that.
So you're saying Bagley's rap career and battle with Dame Lillard isn't cutting it? It's not bringing in no dollars.
If you ain't too careful, that might be his only career if he keeps it up.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this is our NBA awards preview for the upcoming NBA season. All right, we got 3 more to knock out the box, so let's get right into it. Defensive Player of the Year. Gerald, I'm going to start with you. Who is taking up that D boy?
I'm going to say Giannis. I mean, this is what his calling card is. I mean, his offense is really not up to the level of his defense. I think Giannis really garners that award. And, I mean, again, you're talking about a guy that can guard pretty much 1 through 5. So I'm going to say Giannis.
I like that pick. It's hard to repeat as DPOY, but it's very possible for him. He repeated as MVP. So, we'll see how that goes. I think there's going to be, a couple guys here. I'd love to see Marcus Smart get into this conversation, for what he does, especially on the intangibles. Again, live in the Miami area, got off a call today with Bam Adebayo. He is gunning for that award. So I think he's going to be right up there in consideration. I think the league is on notice for what he does in the Miami area. Same thing, can guard 1 through 5 and doesn't give a damn about it. And he will man up and got that great second leap to get rebounds, et cetera, et cetera. But I think this is going to go to Anthony Davis. The Lakers felt like they were robbed last year, and Davis felt like he was robbed when Giannis getting it. I think AD is going to go ahead and garner this award because the Lakers they got to get something. So I didn't get Blink of the Executive of the Year, so I'll give AD Defensive Player of the Year.
Just charitable. Feeling so charitable.
Ironically, would be proud of it.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. So listen, I agree with you, Shaw. I think on paper it's going to wind up going to AD, but in my heart, I think it should probably wind up going to Bam Adebayo. And it's ironic because of all of these teams that we're talking about, we really haven't said a whole lot with regards to the Miami Heat, with the exception of considering Tyler Hero possibly as 6th man of the year. But I just think that it comes down, like, what about the Miami Heat starters? Like, we're talking about the role players and the bench and everything else. But hey, man, Bam Adebayo is an intricate part as to why the Miami Heat were the team that they were and are and will probably wind up being when we talk about where they're going to sit in the Eastern Conference and whether or not they may even come out of the East one more time. Listen, man, he can only get better as a guy that defends. And I think that just goes a long way. One dark horse person I know probably not going to get a lot of conversation or not pull a conversation simply because I think his reputation has been so much about whether or not he does it offensively, but no one ever questions what he does defensively, and that's Ben Simmons. And I don't know if whether or not Doc Rivers is going to be able to really fine tune on him to enhance more even what he brings to the table defensively at his position and the role that he needs to play for the Philadelphia 76ers. And again, I'm a staunch believer that Simmons and Embiid just don't mix. They will not win a championship together. But if you want to talk about individual accolades, I might see Ben Simmons winning a DPOY award well before I see Joel Embiid winning an MVP award. So that's just my take on that.
Great versatility there with Simmons. I love that pick. So again, just so I'm clear, who is your pick? Is it Bam or is it AD?
It's going to be AD. But I'm saying I would like to see Bam Adebayo win it. Again, on paper, AD wins it, right? That's my selection. He's going to win it. But I think someone who's going to wind up, to me, I would think Bam would probably deserve it a lot more than I'm going to assume that AD is. He's going to do what he does. You know what I'm saying? He's going to be great. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying I feel like Bam Adebayo is just going to get overlooked, and I think he's going to have a really great season defensively, but it's going to be overshadowed by AD. I think they're just going to give him the award.
Fair assessment. Gerald, any follow-up there?
I think clearly, you can't argue with the fact that any of those guys. I think that, look, Anthony Davis is going to be in the mix. I mean, clearly, especially what he's coming off of. And then also Bam Adebayo, what he was able to do in the bubble. So those are great picks, and Giannis also in there as well. So great picks.
All right. So let's go ahead and move it towards the Rookie of the Year. I'm going to have my man Shaw step in on this one. Shaw, who are you going to select for your Trouble T. Roy?
Yeah, my dude. It's always about playing time with Rookie of the Year. Like, people aren't looking at what the intangibles are and stuff like that too. It's like, yo, what are your stats? Like, what are your counting stats? Like, they don't even really care what the percentage is when it comes to this award. So just who's going to go out here and put up a bunch of numbers. So I think a guy like Obi Toppin has some ability to potentially do that in New York. I mentioned Halliburton, Killian Hayes, especially if he ends up starting over Derrick Rose, maybe has a shot at that. Wiseman and Golden State makes some sense as well too. Is there just enough ball for him to kind of get there? But speaking of ball, it's LaMelo Ball who's going to be my pick, only because they're going to hand him the keys in Charlotte. They were so excited that he fell to them at 3. They got Gordon Hayward as well too. We talked about Graham and Rozier as well too, but this is going to be Ball's team. They want him to go out here, make mistakes, learn on the ground. And sure, he may have some terrible percentages, but I think he's going to be a guy, whatever, somewhere scoring in the teens, probably maybe even 6, 7, 8 assists a night, 4 or 5 rebounds, maybe even. Like, he's going to put up some decent counting stats. It's just going to be the percentage might be a little bit rough, but LaMelo Ball's my pick. Joe, who you got, bro?
I like, I think about it. This year is such a very unique year, and the situation for a lot of these rookies that there's no summer league for them to make that adjustment. And theoretically, they haven't played organized basketball since maybe early March or late February. So it's been a long time. And then to expect them to come in, I think there's going to be a growth period, an adjustment period to start off the season. I look at guys that are in a situation where the expectations are they don't have to be, quote unquote, the guy. And I look at a guy like James Wiseman and I say that, you know what, his role right now is basically just to fit in. You don't have to be the guy to carry the load. You got pieces that are in place to do that. And I think that he will be allowed to be able to grow into that role in terms of what he's able to do from an offensive standpoint as well as defensively. I like James Wiseman to be my Rookie of the Year simply because I would say that he has the least amount of pressure on him to be the quote-unquote the guy. And I mean, yeah, you could say somewhat with Anthony Edwards in Minnesota, but I just think the fact is that from a defensive standpoint, Wiseman's impact will be greater than Anthony Edwards in terms of what he's able to do offensively. It'll be Wiseman and how he'll be able to affect the game on the defensive side, and everything else he does offensively will be a bonus.
Yeah, I like your selection of James Wiseman. I think I like the selection more because I think James Wiseman now comes into play a lot more than I think even the Golden State Warriors had anticipated. I think that they could have probably gotten away with the idea of them playing the same way that they've been playing over the last 4 or 5 seasons that won them 3 NBA titles, where you're not playing with a significantly impactful big. But I think if there's any expectation to be a serious player, even when you do decide to get, even when they do get Klay Thompson back, it's going to be based on, do they get this right with Wiseman? Now, the one good thing that I can say is that with Wiseman, he obviously has more upside than all of the other bigs that they have whiffed on in their selection process of the NBA draft in previous years. But I think as far as numbers and potential, and obviously if he obviously stays healthy, and you still have a guy like Steph Curry who is still as good as anyone else from the point guard position as a scorer, but also as a distributor. Also, you have Draymond Green as a pass distributor. I think that this is a great opportunity from a numbers perspective for James Wiseman to put himself on the map. Ironically enough, I think a lot of people are really looking at whether or not Obi Toppin is going to wind up being the rookie of the year, I feel like he'll be the most exciting player of the year. But I think when it really comes down to it, when we look at the numbers, James Wiseman to me has the best opportunity for him to put numbers up on a consistent basis for a team that desperately needs rebounding and needs some level of front court scoring, because Draymond Green will just be out there shooting the three ball. And I think as far as the skill set goes, James Wiseman is probably one of the best skilled athletic bigs that are on that platform, given with the circumstance of the team that he's playing for him to ascend himself to be his rookie of the year.
All right, so 2 guys for James Wiseman. Do either of you feel like he has the potential and needs to for rookie of the year? Can he get to a double-double? Even a cheap one,
I
10
think
and
so.
10, or does he finish like 11-8?
I think if he goes, I think if he gives you, I think he gets 13. I think he averages about 13 with himself and the way that the Golden State Warriors play. I think the key, Shaw, to your point, is will he rebound the basketball? Will his ability to be a big, and what the Warriors need in a big, to go there and get boards. If he does that, if he averages as close, like maybe 9 rebounds, maybe 10. I mean, DeAndre Ayton was kind of doing that when he was in Phoenix and he was playing next to Devin Booker. I can't see why James Wiseman wouldn't be capable of doing it, especially if the Warriors are going to be a shooting basketball team still.
And then also, too, just to add to that, is the fact is that the way they play, a lot of ball movement, a lot of movement. So he will get a lot of touches around that rim just based upon the way they play the game and stuff. So I think it's just, the way it's laid out is such a win-win situation. And provided he stays healthy, I would be very hard-pressed to see somebody else be the rookie of the year, especially with the team that's around him. I think that's going to garner even more attention for him.
All right, so now we get to the creme de la creme. We start talking about MVP. So, Gerald, we obviously started with you, and I think it's only right that we end with you on this, right? Who are you eyeing to hoist up most valuable player of the year?
Well, I tell you this, I don't want to sound like somebody's crazy, but I mean, how hard you can't. It's hard to go against LeBron James, but I think that again, he's always going to be in the mix. He's still the best player in the league. I think the MVP this year, and it really says a lot about the NBA. And I've always said this: American-born players need to start taking notice and paying attention. I'm gonna have to say Luka Doncic, and just simply based upon the fact is, like you mentioned earlier, no Kristaps Porzingis to start it off. They don't have a Steph Curry there who played very effective for them as well. I really look at Doncic and what he was able to do in the bubble to now, again, feeling more comfortable and acclimated and handling this sort of quote-unquote role and responsibility of being a guy. I'm going to go out and take it on a limb and saying that, once again, the NBA will have another foreign European basketball player as their MVP representing the league.
I'm going to snatch this from you, Derek. That's not a limb. That's not a limb. Get out of here, man.
LeBron can win it every year, man. LeBron could probably win it every year.
He could. He very well could. But I think Doncic is very much on that Derrick Rose path. You know what I mean? Kind of rookie of the year, All-NBA, All-Star, and now MVP. I think that's just kind of what we're looking at right now. So I'll save the drama. I'm picking Doncic as well. Other guys I'm going to consider for this, or I think we're going to be in the runnings. I think Trae Young, especially if Atlanta takes off. Curry, we were a year
Shaw,
early.
you so badly want
year,
Atlanta to take off. Shaw, you so badly want Atlanta to take off. This is what, 3 years in running now that we're talking about Atlanta taking off. It'd be 2 years. Okay, I'm sorry. It's hard to keep up. I'm telling you, man.
This is like you in Detroit, bro. So don't even come at me with you and the Pistons conversation.
I don't have. I never had the Pistons, being a top 5 seed in the NBA, in the Eastern Conference or nothing like that.
I don't have the Hawks being a top 5 seed.
You had them.
I have them being a 5 through 8 seed.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, moving on. So the other thing I'd say too is like Jason Tatum. If Jason Tatum is the Jason Tatum we saw in January, February of last year, not Jason Tatum who was all-star and pretty good in the bubble. We need that guy who was all NBA, and just lighting people on fire, was player of the month. that guy, if he shows up, he has the potential to get into this conversation as well too. But obviously, I also think Devin Booker can potentially get there. I think he really is that good. But again, my pick is Luka Doncic. Kyle, who you got?
Hey man, let's go 3 for 3. I really, really, really like Luka Doncic this year, man. I really expect the Dallas Mavericks to surprise a lot of people, and they are poised that if they incrementally win more games than what they did this previous season, everyone's going to know who's directly responsible for doing that. And that's the reason why the setup is so nice to see a guy like maybe even Rick Carlisle, again, get reconsidered for Coach of the Year. I just think that what them two have got going on has been incrementally an opening for us to really look at how great Luka Doncic can be. And I think we'll get an opportunity again to talk about it this year because of the uniqueness of this pandemic and the circumstance. I really do think what this comes down to is how are we evaluating what it means to be an MVP kind of player? And I know, listen, LeBron James will always get consideration. Kevin Durant will obviously get consideration if he stays healthy. James Harden, I think, is going to get consideration now that he's going to be playing next to John Wall and not, Russell Westbrook. You know what I mean? Damian Lillard, I really think, is my sleeper pick. I really think, you were talking about it earlier before, Gerald. If the Portland Trailblazers are as good as you want them to be, and I think they can be, it's going to be because Damian Lillard is just going to be on a freaking rampage. He is just... If he lights it up the way that I think that we know that he's capable of lighting it up, and it translates to the Portland Trailblazers being among the top teams in the Western Conference, there's no question he is going to get MVP considerations. My caveat to that is, can they do that? Because they always struggle. They struggle in the beginning of the year. They don't come out the gates fast. They don't take advantage of their division. And then they're still dealing with the Denver Nuggets and with the Utah Jazz in that same division. And listen, the Oklahoma City Thunder are not going to be anything to snuff at. They're going to be challenges. But the Portland Trailblazers always seem to underplay themselves to a point where they take themselves out and not just team considerations, but individual accolades as well too. And sometimes it's too little too late. But in the end, I think that when you look at it, consistency, greatness, clutch situations, I don't think that there's anybody better right now next to Dame Lillard than Luka Doncic. I think this could be the year. This should be the year of the Doncic. And if not, then damn it, it may be because Damian Lillard was just that big of a monster.
Can we say that this is the first time in quite some time that James Harden is not being mentioned as a potential MVP candidate?
There's a wall in front of James Harden's hopes to win another MVP. I hope he ain't pro-Trump. I don't know if he wanted that kind of wall being built in Houston for himself. So
I think great conversation. Lillard's an amazing pick as well too, and I think there's so many great talents around the league, right? And you want to see everyone succeed, but the criteria is going to be interesting. And I think I'm even switching sides a little bit from our autopsy report with Doncic, because it's like, well, it depends where Dallas finishes. If Dallas is a 5 seed or something like that, it's like, can he still be MVP? Well, I think Russ proved that, but Russ obviously needed a triple-double, and I think Doncic is going to approach those types of numbers as well, too, especially if he has to do the heavy lifting with Porzingis out to begin the year as well, too. So I think I've definitely come around since, maybe 3 weeks ago into Doncic is like, you know what? I don't really see anybody else who's going to get it. There's Giannis fatigue. There's always LeBron fatigue. And I just don't think AD is there yet. And we talked about Harden and guys like that, too. So I think it's definitely Doncic's year.
Does it surprise me a little bit, though, that we never mentioned Devin Booker as a possible MVP candidate? Well, I'm just saying, like, do we think that this is the year where he will definitely be in consideration? We don't think that he will necessarily win it, but we think that he will definitely be in considerations for MVP. Or do you think it's another year before that happens?
No, I think it's this year. I think he cracks the top 5 in that, especially if Phoenix is as good as we hope they're going to be. And I know a lot of that credit will quote unquote go to Chris Paul because of the leadership, et cetera, et cetera. But CP came out in the media day and says, like, listen, everyone's talking about me being a leader and bringing guys up. It's like, yo, I'm his teammate. You know what I mean? Like, I want to win too. So Booker has got to do as much for CP as CP does for him as well too. And I think Booker is going to get into that sphere right now, especially if Phoenix can get into, a 6-5 seed or something like that as well. I think Booker has to be in the top 5, not 3 or 2, but definitely 4 or 5. I think that he has that type of talent.
Gerald, finals.
It'd be really interesting to see what he does, in terms of if he's able to play enough games and stuff like that. I think that's only been the knock on him. But I mean, Kawhi, you got still, like I said before, you got James Harden out there, Kyrie, just really, really wide open this year. And who's to say, how impressive would it be if Giannis and the Bucks put up another monster season, which they were headed towards that first half of the season before the break, that he's a 3-time champion, a 3-time MVP. That would be, something.
Yeah, I
so
mean,
it's going to be really interesting this year.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely, Gerald. Like you cannot count out the idea that maybe even still the monster of that is Giannis can actually shatter the once again evolving norms that we try to put down and solidify as us perceive, like understanding who's gonna what is it to be an MVP, what does it mean being an MVP in the NBA. I mean, he very much could put himself in that position to do such a thing, just because of how unique a player Giannis Antetokounmpo is. I think if it was like James Harden or maybe Steph Curry, or maybe even LeBron James, I think then that's when we start talking about the fatigue level of this. But I think the fatigue level sets in that if we're saying that Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to be, again, putting up MVP-like type of numbers, and it doesn't translate to anything significant for the Bucks actually going to an NBA's finals or competing for NBA finals, man, we're going to be sitting here looking over the last 3 years saying, what the hell were we looking at to determine that he would be worthy of such a thing, which we know he is. But in the end, we're just like, damn, man, this guy's getting awards, but it don't mean nothing because he's not winning anything significant for the time that he's been a Milwaukee Bucks. It's crazy, to say the least. Gerald, man, once again, we appreciate you jumping on board with us and breaking bread with us, man. I know as busy a schedule you have, what I'm saying, with your multiple shows going on, we do sincerely appreciate you taking a little bit of time, to hopping on with us, man, and kind of, opening up the crystal ball a little bit, giving a little bit of predictions of what this NBA season might mean for some of these players.
No, yeah. Hey, listen, man, I appreciate y'all brothers for having me on the show, man. And you know what? I'm never too busy to be in a situation where we can sit down and chop it up with you guys. And, Cal, I got to put it on you because, I had Sean. You definitely got to make that step in terms of coming on SiriusXM NBA Radio, man, because like I said from day one, man, I always want to make sure we try to bring everybody over because I think there's some quality. I know that there's quality people out there that can talk sports and all this other stuff. And sometimes it's just really, we got to get our feet in that door. So, I mean, look, if I can be able to get my foot in that door, hold it open, bring brothers in there, consider it done. But I appreciate you guys having me on anytime, man. Definitely look forward to you guys coming on the SiriusXM side as well as even on with Bonzi and Rasheed, man. Just let me know.
Absolutely, man. Our man, Gerald Brown, Beeline Sports on SiriusXM Radio, and also with Let's Get Technical with Bonzi Wells and Rasheed Wallace. Once again, be sure to check out their show on YouTube, youtube.com/Let's Get Technical. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast. And this was The Breakdown.
It's still aftermath, and ain't nothing after that.
Mr. Shaw, as always, man, what more can be said? When you bring the OGs on board, man, I mean, it's not just nostalgic. It can also be just downright nasty, man, like the good stuff, like the good kind of nasty as far as the content goes, man. Just awesome having our man Gerald Brown back on with us to get us ready and right for this upcoming NBA season.
Yeah, great discussion, some deep dives going into, some deep rotation players for some potential awards. And I think that's what our show is about. And with a guy like Gerald, who just definitely knows his stuff, just it kind of occurred to me, maybe he has some piston ties like you in some ways. He does the Bottom Line Sports Show with Rick Mahorn. Then he's got Sheed on, with Bonzi, and Let's Get Technical as well, too. So, he's a great follow on social media. And just, again, as I said in the intro, just one of the better dudes that you could ever kind of come into contact with. So I hope fans and listeners enjoyed the show, enjoyed the energy that he brought, the rapport that we have with him as well too. And we want to know what their picks are for NBA awards. Who you think should be MVP? Who should be most improved, sixth man, et cetera, et cetera. So can't wait to hear what the fans and listeners have to say about this.
Absolutely, man. I think that conversation is going to be ongoing all the way up until NBA tip. And then hey man, this is what piques our interest, is really seeing whether or not the guys that we're mentioning and the guys that you might be thinking of are going to step up and step out and make their presence felt for this upcoming NBA season. As uniquely set up as it is, it still comes down to the players executing on the court. And I think we've laid out quite a number of guys that I think everyone should keep their eye out for, because this is their time to shine. Once again, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us this week. And again, thanks to our man Gerald Brown for jumping on and helping us. Once again, be sure to catch him on Instagram at Gerald BLS. So it's GeraldBLSS on his Instagram. But again, be sure to check out his shows. Great guy, great shows all together. For the Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Sharp, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. And we'll catch up with you